articulate announcements. It's only talk. Exclamations, exaggerations, it's all talk. Elephant talk. Elephant talk. Elephant talk.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Great to have you here in person in Cole Hall. Great to have you with us online from afar. I want you to know that we just checked off a big bucket list for me. I wanted to have a worship prelude before I retire that included Led Zeppelin and King Crimson. So now I can retire. We ring this bell as we do each Sunday. This first bell is to be in conversation with our past. We are on the unceded land of the MPUUC tribe who were displaced and colonized, their land taken. Everything that we do to keep their culture and their voices from erasure and promote their sovereignty is working our way back into covenant. The second bell calls us to recognize where pride and hubris, domination and oppression, whether from others or from ourselves, has established a wake of division and disharmony. We call ourselves and one another to be agents of reconciliation and repair until we are all beloved to one another. And the third calls us into dialogue with our descendants, our children, and our children's children, reminding us that we did not inherit this planet from our forefathers, we are borrowing it from our children.
Good morning. Good morning. The changing of the computer prompters, his and mine. What makes a person a person? Well, according to several websites I use, a person is an entity which can tell which squares contain traffic lights. This test of personness is supposedly derived from the work of the famous mathematician and cryptanalyst Alan Turing. But the original Turing test was not a procedure to determine whether one entity was a person, but rather a comparative test to determine which of two entities was a person and which a machine. Further, it was not based on a formalized interaction, but rather a free-flowing intercommunication. I don't know whether Alan Turing was influenced by the Xhosa concept of Ubuntu, or whether Desmond Tutu was influenced by the work of Turing in his understanding of Ubuntu as a person is a person because of other people. Most likely, both were responding to a deep understanding that free communication with another human is essential to being a person. Maybe I'm not a person. I frequently find communication with others difficult. Sometimes I feel like two of us are speaking different languages, which merely happen to use the same words, though with different meanings, just to confuse our efforts to communicate. So, let me take the other side of Turing's equation. Maybe, did I already say that? Maybe I'm a computer. My course of life would seem to indicate I communicate better with computers than with people. I have written quite a few computer programs in my life, for school, for work, and for my own interests. Many of them actually work and produce valuable results, though I would not claim any of them are bug-free. But even here, I have run into problems. Twice, I have written programs to translate from one computer language to another. For an employer long ago, I wrote a program to translate from one version of the basic language to another. It was surprisingly difficult, with numerous pitfalls, including interpretations of whether or not two sequences of symbols were equal if they differed by one having an extra blank space on the end. More recently, when my BASIC compiler became obsolete, I wrote a program to translate my personal computer programs to Python. I need to do a lot of testing of each result and clean up numerous details. But as difficult as the task may be, we must continue to exert our best efforts to explain ourselves and understand each other, realizing we will not succeed perfectly, but that every improvement we achieve is an addition to our personness and the personness of another. Let us worship together. Oh, indeed. And thank you, Reverend Greg. And in a moment, some words will appear on the screen, which I invite you to recite with me. We light this chalice. Yes, they are. We light this chalice to remind ourselves to treat all people kindly, because we are all one family. To take good care of the earth, because it is our home. To live lives full of goodness and love, because that is how we will become the best people we can be.
Good morning, Mission Peak, and welcome everybody. And my name, of course, is Drew Wilson, he, him, and I'm a member of the board. We are glad you joined us this morning. I'm going to start out by highlighting some current announcements. May Day Strong, Indivisible, with whom we shared our plate, and over 200 other organizations are organizing a National Day of Action on Friday, May 1st, 2026. They are asking that we exert our economic power for one day by keeping our children and grandchildren home from school, staying home from work, and buying nothing for 24 hours. Children and grandchildren will be happy about that. Now, also, I'll add my own little announcement on if you want to get up really early in the morning before dawn and drive over to Bay Meadows wetlands on the border between Mountain View and Palo Alto, the local Wiccan and pagan community will be celebrating the beginning of their spring with a little ceremony there. Sean and I will be there. And part of the thing we do is we make sure that the sun rises, so you can thank us all. and it's mostly things like Morris dancing and some other ceremonial stuff. Anyway, I like it. All right, so having said all of that, Unitarian Universalism is a radically inclusive, non-doctrinal, non-dogmatic, and open-minded and open-hearted faith. We are people who are all coming at truth from different paths, even some of us a little bit paganish. We gather together across different identities, experiences, and beliefs to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Together, we see our job is to love the hate out of this world, heal the hurt in ourselves and one another, and to be the change we'd like to see in the world. If you are our guest for the first time, we welcome you. Here's a bit of information on how our hybrid services work. We use chat in Zoom or our book near the welcome table to share joys and concerns, personal milestones of importance, which will be read aloud in the service at a later point. We also have a social hour after the service where we get to meet and visit with each other in breakout rooms or, due to the weather, today in Cole Hall, which is also where the coffee will be. The worship host will give you more information about this immediately after the service if you are online. Someone from our membership team, again, if you're online, will put a link to our weekly newsletter in chat so that you can see all the events coming up. We encourage you to join anything that speaks to you. If you are here in person, our welcome table is right next to the door that you entered, and you can sign up there to receive a newsletter or ask the person all sorts of questions. Finally, please make sure your mobile devices are silenced. We are so glad to be together today that we'll end by asking everyone in Zoomlandia and everyone in Cole Hall to wave to one another and feel the joy of being one large beloved community. Welcome and thank you to our members and friends near and far.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Very exciting story for this morning. How many people have ever heard of spoonerisms? With spoonerisms, you have to whip your flirts. If you don't whip your flirts, you will get trost in landslation, and it won't sake ments. An example of a spoonerism is the story of Rindercella and the Pransome Hints, where Rindercella lived with her two sad bisters. And at the end, as she was running out of the boil rawl in her drancy fess, she heard the moke of stridnite. And as she ran down the stairs to the coarse-drawn herrage so fast, she slopped her dripper. Okay, so if you understand that, I'm going to sell you the Tory about Univarian Unitersalism, the one Rue-teligion. The thing you have to know is that in order to be a Rue-teligion, you must leach Tuv. When all is dead and sun, if a teligion doesn't leach Tuv, it isn't Rue. There are many other unrue teligions, and of course, they don't leach Tuv. They are boo-tizzy snandling hakes. With all the roblums in the purled, why would any Rue-teligion waste its time snandling hakes? I think it's because they believe that hake snandling will sorgive your fins. Because if your fins aren't sorgiven, you'll hind up in well. Another thing that you won't find in Rue-teligion is teaking in spungs. Members of these congregations spontaneously haze their rands and jock tibberish. They profess to be communicating with the spoly hearit. That's one of the reasons I became a Univarian Universalist, because I wanted a chovely lurch where no one hinds up in well, even if all your fins aren't sorgiven. Now, you may discover that some Univarian Universalists will occasionally whisk their turds, but there is no teaking in spungs. We believe all seeple are paved, and that everyone here has dearth and wignity. So if you're looking for a chovely lurch where all your fins are forgiven and where everyone is treated with dearth and wignity, go to a chovely Univarian Universalist lurch. There you will become part of the one root religion where no one hinds up in well. Did that sake mense? Then everyone say, Mayhen.
How can I follow that? I did not have time to translate these words into Spoonerism, so, oh well. We take up a collection on Sundays for the simple reason that our purpose in gathering is for more than ourselves. We want to make sure that the ministries that we need, the ones that infuse worth and dignity, I think I'm going to Spoonerize this anyway, I don't know. The ones that infuse worth and dignity into our children, our youth, our programs of learning and leadership, and our ministries of anti-oppression and our work in the larger world are in place to meet the needs of others. We hope you will make a contribution toward these worthy causes by mailing your check to Mission Peak UU Congregation at the address on the screen. You can also use the bill pay option in your online banking or drop your check into the Mission Peak mail slot or pay online with a credit or debit card. You can probably also stuff dollar bills through our slot out there, but that's probably not the safest way to do it. Thank you. Thank you for supporting and sustaining the efforts of our members. Friends and staff, your contributions make loving, learning, and leadership more possible. Oh, with all the words beginning in L, you can't Spoonerize that. Okay, loving, learning, and leadership are now possible. Thank you all.
One of the things that we do here to be a Chovely Lurch is we show up. We show up in one another's lives. We do what consultant Peter Senge calls presencing. We presence people back into their best selves, whether it's because they're high from a great accomplishment or they're low from a sudden feat of bad luck. If you would like to write a joy or concern to call for good company in your life, we invite you to write something in the book. Put your name, a short sentence or two about the joy or concern that you would like to have us hold in our hearts for you. If you are with us online, please do that in the chat, and we will share those so that we can attend to one another and presence each other into their best selves. If you would like to drop a stone into our stone garden while we hear the beautiful music, you are welcome to do that. And if you would like to have a personal conversation rather than a public announcement about your life, then please come see me after the service, or Reverend Barber, or really anyone here. They're all Chovely people. So.
listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. My hands are wide open, eyes are wide open to see what I may be. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. My hands are wide open, eyes are wide open to see what I may be. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. In this moment of silence, speak to me. I can hear the voices of all my kin. I'm listening. Clicking. I'm listening. Calling. Spirit, speak to me. My hands are wide open, eyes are wide open to see what I may be. I'm listening. In this moment of silence, I'm listening. Spirit, speak to me.
For all of these joys and sorrows, for the ones still left in our hearts, we promise to keep our minds, our hearts, our arms, and our doors open. Please join me with the spirit of this reflection. Reflection this morning is taken from the book of Genesis in the Hebrew Scriptures, Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its tops in the heavens, that we may make a name for ourselves, know and be known, lest we be scattered and disconnected over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the people had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth. End passage. Now, you might have had the same expression on your face as I had when I first heard that passage. What the? Why would such a story be told? I mean, isn't learning to speak the same language a good thing? Isn't it what we're all trying to do? Isn't it what God wants for us? Why would God want to mix up our language, make communication and cooperation harder? Why would a religion trying to make a name for itself write a story that ends up separating and scattering people instead of bringing them together? It's important to remember that the stories that we take from the Jewish faith were written approximately 3,500 years ago, and they were part of a meticulously crafted oral tradition for much longer than that. Scholars argue that it makes no sense for Judaism's leaders to have perpetuated stories for so long, especially if they portray Yahweh, the Jewish God, in such a negative light. Further, scholars remind us that the Jewish oral tradition was steeped in paradox, and the stories were moral lessons, often far from straightforward in their message. Today, we will look for what hidden truths Jewish teachers were wanting to reveal in God's determination to mix up our language.
Careful the things you say. Children will listen. Careful the things you do. Children will see. And learn. Children may not obey, but children will listen. Children will look to you to see what to do and learn what to be. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen. Careful the wish you make. Wishes are children. Careful the path they take. Wishes come true. Not free. Careful the spell you cast, not just on children. Sometimes the spell may last past what you can see, and turn against you. Careful the tale you tell. That is the spell. Children will listen.
Thank you all. "40 years ago, as an undergrad in physics, I was in a library doing research on Einstein's attempt to establish a unified field theory. One book I came upon made a big impression on me. It was by David Bohm, a famous professor of physics at UC Berkeley, and his book was called Wholeness and the Implicate Order. I was surprised to discover that this book was written by such a preeminent physicist, and it actually wasn't about unifying physical laws. Instead, it focused on unifying language, and specifically, it was about dialogue. I learned that the word dialogue came from the Greek, dia, meaning through, and logos, meaning word. Through words, we make meaning. Through dialogue, we share that meaning. A key difference between dialogue and ordinary discussion, Bohm wrote, is that within the latter, people usually hold relatively fixed positions and argue their points of view, attempting to convince others to change. At best, this may produce agreement or compromise, but it rarely produces anything truly creative. Furthermore, whenever anything of deep significance is discussed, positions often become rigidly non-negotiable, and the exchange degenerates into either entrenched confrontation, where there is no solution, or into polite avoidance of the issues. Neither of these outcomes produces a truly integrative evolution of ideas, just an attack on or defense of ideologies. In dialogue, however, two people can listen with interest and curiosity, even change their points of view when there is good reason to do so. Clearly, some spirit of love need to be present. Bohm went on to say, "We need to learn how to be in dialogue with one another in order to deal with all the fragmentation in the world. Overcoming fragmentation can only happen when dialogue is employed to help produce an understanding of the collective wholeness of which we are all part." Although the book did not discuss the unified field theory of physical laws, it provided me with a power that led to the implicate reordering of my life. Fast forward from that point 20 years to 2005, where I was standing at a bakery counter 10,000 miles from that library in Berkeley. I was in the small Greek village of Kostraki. I had switched careers from physics and engineering to ministry, and I was on sabbatical after 6 years as a parish minister. I'd been at a week-long retreat at the ancient monastery in Meteora. The food at the monastery was intentionally sparse, and after 4 days, I was very hungry. The monks laughed at our 4 a.m. prayers when my stomach would growl. So, after the prayers, I hiked the 5 miles down the mountain to find some food in the village. Now, it was spring, and one of the readings that we were studying at that retreat was in the Lectio Divina style, which is studying scripture, and it was about Pentecost, the story in the Gospels of how after Jesus had been killed, the Spolihirate visited the disciples and granted them the power to teak in spungs so that they could be understood by the people in whatever foreign land that they traveled to. And I remember having been in Greece for only a few weeks, but yet being incredibly frustrated at only knowing a few Greek words and phrases. I was constantly misunderstood when getting directions or ordering food, and I wanted to be able to speak in the tongue of the land I was in order to be understood. So, with the faith that the Spoli Herit was with me, I decided to try to speak the language of the people whose food I was buying, and I approached the counter in that bakery, smiled at the middle-aged woman at the counter who stood there without even checking my Greek dictionary, and asked confidently if I could have her 2 mothers who had milked the hot goat. And her eyes got very wide. And it was the look in her face which told me that the Spoli Herit was definitely not with me that morning. So I scrambled for my dictionary, but before I could correct myself and before her hand could cover her mouth, she spit on me as laughter came bursting forth. And after a brief explanation, mostly in charades, we learned 3 things about one another. First, that she didn't mean to spit on me. In fact, she appreciated the exchange so much that she gave me some motherly milked hot goats for free and called her husband from the room upstairs to come talk to us. Thankfully, he didn't spit on me either. And his slightly better English helped us all conclude that, 2, I didn't mean to insult her mother or her goats. I just wanted 2 feta cheese pastries and to be able to speak the language. And finally, 3, they both seemed appreciative that I would attempt to speak their language rather than just pointing or insisting that they speak mine. Whoever said, "It's all Greek to me," probably never had their mothers accused of milking hot goats. Another story, not as successful, comes from the organizational consultant Peter Senge about a South African he was working with by the name of Louis van der Merwe. Mr. van der Merwe was working with one of the largest companies in South Africa, an electrical utilities company called Eskom. The year was about 1986, at the heart of apartheid. The plant, which had been very competitive and profitable for years, was now having trouble keeping up with innovations in the industry. What they had been able to discern is that part of the evolution that would be needed in the decades ahead involved looking at the racism inherent in the top-down dominant culture way of doing business. After a few weeks, van der Merwe came to the heart of the problem, but they were having trouble naming it. Although Eskom's engineers all worked extremely hard, they proved completely unable to work together in teams, to share information and openly and equally cooperate. They were all so prideful and protective of their individual work. Van der Merwe had spent a lot of time in the US and knew the issue was somewhat cultural. He knew that white South African culture was shaped much like ours, people who had fiercely independent and entrepreneurial spirits who placed 95% of their focus on being influential and only 5% on being influenceable. Their ethos was about maintaining control over the situation, even over their colleagues. Their stubbornness and refusal to work together prevented a cross-pollination of ideas, and they were limited by a rigidity in their collective imagination. After unsuccessfully hiring many white South African consultants, van der Merwe tried bringing in 10 black South African consultants. These consultants, who had been raised in a very different set of cultural assumptions, were less competitive. They were more creative, more cooperative. Instead of holding ideas in a perspective of individual ownership, they sought to cultivate a communal or shared understanding. One of the consultants they brought in was a man by the name of Joseph, who quickly got everyone's attention with his spirit of cooperation. And after a rather intense meeting where conversations broke down again, Vandermeer noticed that Joseph was visibly upset, and he asked Joseph what was going on. Joseph responded, "Oh, Mr. Louis, don't you see what just happened? During the meeting, I shared my idea, and no one said anything." And Vandermeer reflected back, Yeah, I remember now. It was a very intense conversation, and you made a comment, and then nobody responded. And Joseph said, Yes. And Vandermeer continued, "Well, you know, Joseph, we all get really worked up, but obviously someone should have said something about your comment. It was very rude." "Mr. Louis, you do not understand. They do not make me a person." They do not make me a person. Earlier, Paul shared about the Bantu concept in the African culture about Ubuntu. Desmond Tutu helped to bring this concept to Western culture in his peace and reconciliation work after apartheid. Tutu defined Ubuntu as a radical interdependence. It translates as I am because you are. A person becomes a person through other people. In African culture, it is the collective which has the power and the responsibility to reflect back to a person their value and their voice, their worth and their dignity. When a collective fails to do so, they risk some individuals never finding their wholeness. The reason David Boehm's book changed my life is because it pointed out how the world exists in such a fragmented and divided manner. We feel separated and participate in the fragmentation of those around us, even though we all yearn to feel unified and whole. When this fragmentation is allowed to spread throughout a culture, we wind up with what we are seeing now in the Trump administration: intentional division, weaponizing of ego and pride, denigrating subordinates. I became Unitarian Universalist and a minister after discovering that no unified field theory could bring human beings together unless we first learned to understand ourselves as fundamentally indivisible and interconnected. As a UU minister, I never learned to speak in tongues. I have frequently felt misunderstood. I have been laughed at, on occasion even spit on. And I've watched people who felt slighted take umbrage and retreat further into fragmentation instead of extending into their wholeness. Although we know Ubuntu as something which emerged from the Bantu culture, it is deeper than that. Before I ever heard the word Ubuntu, I saw it. I saw it in people's faces as they discovered their own personhood reflected back to them by the people who discovered how to let go of hurt, set aside pride, and reflect back love instead of umbrage. People light up when they discover the secret of this liberating truth. It is impossible for a group in power to extend to someone something as complex and precious as their own personhood, as long as that group remains obsessed with defending and protecting its own pride. Think back for a moment to the words from the passage in Genesis about the builders of the great Tower of Babel. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, to know and be known, lest we be disconnected and scattered over the face of the whole earth. Let me ask, in your encounters with people who try so hard to make a name for themselves, who may go on and on about their accomplishments and their abilities, what is your usual response? Usually, even if we manage to see beyond the arrogance of prideful persons strutting their plumage, we quickly understand the wisdom of what Ben Franklin said when he made the comment, "A person all wrapped up in themselves usually makes for a pretty small package." The truth is, we get bored hearing people go on and on about themselves, and we lose interest. We stop listening. We stop paying attention. It's important to recognize that in the entire Bible, God is only described as coming down to earth a few precious times. Why would one of those times be for the purpose of mixing up our language? Unless, of course, if the language the people had learned to speak was the language of pride. The story is most often translated as saying God came down and mixed up their language so that they could not understand one another. But the Hebrew word translated as understand is shema, which more often translates as hear or listen. I don't think the work on the tower was abandoned because people stopped understanding one another, but because people stopped listening to one another. The tower fell like all great things cease because talking became more important than listening, monologue more important than dialogue. It just so happens that I met God once. At least I met someone who did exactly what I would imagine God did during the whole Tower of Babel incident. Only she did it as the dean of our UU leadership school nearly 30 years ago. Her name was Helen Bishop. I was one of 7 people serving on the faculty of leadership school, and we had come together 2 days before all of the students came, and we did an orientation. And there was one exercise that I fondly refer to as the Babelizer. And it was designed to help us learn how to speak the same language and get on the same page and work together. The actual name of the exercise is called Broken Squares, and it started with the 5 principal faculty members sitting around a table. Helen gave each of us a manila envelope and told us not to open it. Inside, she explained, we would find 2, 3, or 4 pieces of cardboard cut into one of these shapes. Our task was to see how long it would take all of us to take the pieces that we were given and form completed squares in front of us. No participant was provided with all the pieces that they needed to complete their own square without any pieces left over. So there were also some rules we had to follow in order to complete the task. Number 1, this exercise was to be done in complete silence, no talking. Number 2, we were not allowed to point or signal in any way to other participants with our hands about any piece that we needed. Each participant must put together his or her own square. No one else could show any other participant how to do it or to do it for them. We weren't allowed to take or even show interest in a piece from another player, but we could give any one of our pieces at any time to any other participant. And other participants could give us pieces that they had. And finally, we were reminded that we were being timed to see how long it would take us to complete the square in front of us. Right? When we were told to begin, I opened my envelope and I pulled out my 4 pieces, and I couldn't make a square. I played with them for a few minutes to see what I had and what I needed, and then I began to look around at what everyone else had. Right away, I saw that I could trade for a piece that would help me complete my square. But the rules said that I couldn't just reach out and take somebody else's piece. I had to give them my extra piece. So that's what I did. I gave them an extra piece, and in return, they offered me a piece other than the one that I needed. And I took it, and I placed it alongside my other pieces to demonstrate how clearly it was the wrong piece. Then I handed it back to them. Just as I'd hoped, they noticed and gave me the piece that I needed. I completed my square, and I was the first one finished. I sat back, feeling very proud of myself, and I looked around at the others trying to work on their squares. They all seemed to be fighting the urge to talk out loud or grab a missing piece from across the table, and knowing that I had used all of my pieces and didn't have any to give away, I just watched. When Helen saw that I had finished, she walked over and stood behind me. She peered over my shoulder for a second, and then she reached out and she mixed up my square. And I looked back at her incredulously, and I put my square back together. And I looked back at her, and then she looked at me, and then she mixed up my square. Now, I was indignant. I reached out and put my square back together again, and then I tried to protect my square, but she messed it up again. And I sat there frustrated. Meanwhile, a few others had completed their square, which made me even more angry, and the rest were still scrambling unsuccessfully like me to figure out how to put their squares together. What it was taking me so long to figure out was that there was only one way to put all the squares together, and that one person completing their square in a certain configuration would prevent all of the others from being able to complete their squares. I had the missing piece that would unlock the network for everyone to be successful. What I needed to do, what Helen was prompting me to do, was to reimagine a new way to put my square together instead of staying fixated on my original way, which I eventually did, but not before I and everyone else in the group felt the sting of my pride. 30 years ago, when I picked up that book, Wholeness and the Implicate Order, I thought it wasn't about the unified field theory. And 30 years of humility as a spiritual practice has shown me it was all about the unified field theory. Again, the word Ubuntu. I am because you are. A person only becomes a person through other people. It is the collective which has the power and the responsibility to reflect back to a person their value and their voice and their worth and their dignity. When a collective fails to do this, they risk some individuals never finding their wholeness. Listen. Understand. Shema. Open your heart beyond tolerance, and you will understand. There is a greater call beyond pride that asks us to come together. We do not need to teak in spungs or be visited by the spoly herit to know Ubuntu. This Chovley Lurch is trying to help us discover our own personhood, to put our own squares together, but also to create wholeness when working with those around us, to create a unified field theory through a dialogue of the heart. Take a risk. Let go of pride. And you may have room to receive the humanity this place is holding out to you. Be still and be part of people offering personhood. For it is there we can all practice that ancient, elusive, sacred wholeness, calling us all to the glory of life.
Do you hear, my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land? Do you hear, in the heights of the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain? Do you hear, do you hear? Through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush, do you hear in the hush of your soul, of your soul? Hear the cry, fear won't still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh, startling trill, in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear all the dreams, all the tears, all the sighs, all the prayers? They are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear? Do you hear?
Before I extinguish the chalice, I'd like to introduce you to Toby here. Toby is a person of the Maltese breed of species Canis domestica. Newty and I are caring for him for 10 days while his family are on vacation. He has been teaching me his language. I have learned, goody, goody, we're going for a walk, and goody, goody, here's my dinner. And he has a bit of arthritis, so we've had to learn, please pick me up and please put me down. Now, let's join together as we extinguish this flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, hand on your heart and one out to the universe, trying to complete this network of implicate order. Hold this moment. Listen with your whole heart. Shema. There is a greater call beyond pride that asks us to come together. We do not need to teak in spungs or know the spoli hear it. All we need is to have our soul open for love. Let us be part of that love. Let us carry it out into the world wherever it is needed. And let us make whole this world that depends on us. Amen.
Mayhem.
Mayhem.